Welcome back to Influence America with Jordan Rickards and myself, Glenn DeLake. And we're excited to be talking to you today about unique topics, maybe not so unique the topics, but certainly the responses and the perspectives, both from Jordan's perspective and mine. And hopefully, I'm sure you'll see the differences between us and also the agreement between us as well as we stand in a goal to help America move in the right direction. With that in mind, we were talking about Jordan's writing about the Latino perspective of the president, and I left off with, which Jordan is going to jump in on, the fact that this huge influx of people from the third world are now flowing across our borders, and people here are talking about legitimating their illegal actions and of coming here illegally and making them citizens for the simple reason to grab votes in that direction, which I think that people who even have that mindset don't realize the depth of what that means, because although it may mean they get Democratic votes at this moment in time, it may very well mean a dramatic shift in the way our country thinks and the direction we go, leading us to be more like a third world nation. So with that said, Jordan, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I don't think we're ever going to become a third world nation, but I think there are a lot of economic indicators that show that we're headed in the wrong direction. And not just that, but cultural indicators. You know, what we keep hearing about these kids coming from the third world is they're really refugees, that they're escaping all this violence. Well, that's nothing new down there, all the poverty and violence, especially in Honduras. But I want you to consider this. Honduras, where they're fleeing from, has a homicide rate of about 90 people for every 90 homicides for every 100,000 people. So that's called a homicide rate of 90. In New Orleans, as recently as 2009, the homicide rate was 95. Okay, this year Trenton experienced 111 shootings for every 100,000 people, and Trenton's not even the most dangerous city in New Jersey. It's Camden, and Camden doesn't have nearly as many murders as Newark. I mean, we have pockets in the United States already that have fallen into complete lawlessness and dysfunction. So if we're going to do the compassionate thing, we have to ensure that the America that immigrants come to is one where they can get work, where they can get education, and where they can live in a safe environment. Because when you take people and you put them into a dysfunctional environment, you grow that dysfunction. So I think the Obama administration has failed really to answer the questions of how can we justify bringing all these people in to solve their problems when we haven't solved our own. I want to read this to you. This is from Thomas Sowell, who's probably the most brilliant economist of our day. He wrote in this article in last week, he said, 100 years ago, when there was a huge influx of immigrants from Europe, there were extensive government studies of what those immigrants did in the United States. There were data on how many, from what countries, who ended up in jail, how many were diseased or on the dole. There were data on how well their children did in school. As with most things, some immigrant groups did very well and others did not do nearly as well. But today, even to ask such questions is to be considered mean-spirited.
Right, or worse, racist.
Well, yeah, right, and I think that's what the implication is. Now, I will say this, I think with the Hispanic population, you have good reason to be optimistic with them, if we can build a good structure around them. They are, for the most part, God-fearing, right, family-oriented, and hard-working. I mean, I've never seen a Hispanic person on the side of the street begging for money. You know, they look for work. And those three values, God-fearing, hard-working, and family-oriented, is what made America great. We just have to make sure that when they get here, we provide them with an America that's God-fearing, hard-working, and family-oriented, because that's precisely what we've gotten away from.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I like the idea of you bringing to the table that what are we bringing them into, and is that really humanitarian? Are we just taking them from one level of abstract poverty to another, you know? I mean, there's so many social implications here that I think are being ignored, and again, I think people are afraid to mention them for two reasons. Number one, conservatives have a natural bent not to make a point of those issues. Because in themselves, they're conservatives, right? And the liberals are so bent on capturing their vote that they'll say anything even though they mean something else. You know, so you have this real precarious situation where you're bringing these people in and literally using them. And then what are you doing with them? Leaving them in the gutter to fend for themselves. They don't know the language, they don't have any money, they don't have citizenship, So what are you really doing? I mean, it's almost tantamount of child abuse what's going on our border,
Right.
obviously. I mean, you're corralling these people in. I heard last night there was a huge breakout in one of the containment centers, or whatever you want to call it, that is having a huge outbreak of chicken pox and some other diseases. We're freaking out because they're bringing one Ebola person from Africa. And again, I'm not saying right or wrong, I'm not going to comment on that. But yet we're bringing tens of thousands, eventually hundreds of thousands of people across the border that we don't know what they're carrying.
Yeah.
And we're not even checking. We're just putting them on a bus and integrating them to the center of the U.S., even as far as New Jersey.
Alaska.
Alaska. I can't believe how many people in New Jersey have been sent here to New Jersey, and no one's even said anything about it.
But now I'll tell you this, Glenn. I was in my office a few days ago with a friend of mine who's from Mexico. She's here legally, but she's not a citizen. And as I was talking to her, it struck me at how pained I would be to see her removed from the country.
Right.
She's come here and she's done all the right things. First of all, she's a lovely person. And I can say this about a lot of my friends, okay? And she works hard and she provides for her parents and her sister also. And to remove her from the country, I think, would be cruel.
Mhm.
So I think there should be a solution for someone like her. But the problem is we kind of have this giant cultural divide, which is made even greater in Congress, because Congress is now afraid to do anything, right?
Right.
I mean, you have the Republicans, ever since Cantor got primaried and lost largely on the immigration issue, who are going to one extreme of being completely uncompromising, and a president who's never inclined to compromise at all. And we should say, in fairness, that this was not a problem that he created. That this, if you really look at this situation, it dates back to the Bush presidency, back starting in 2000. We had the same immigration problem back then. These 11 million people didn't show up when Obama was elected.
Right.
We had the same problem back then. Republicans controlled Congress for 6 years, and all they did was line their own pockets and increase spending by 50% and prosecute 2 wars very poorly.
Mhm.
For as much as we've said the word Obama over and over again here, there's a lot of shared blame. That's really what socialism's about, by the way. It's not about shared responsibility, it's about shared blame.
Right.
And there's plenty of it to go around in Washington. I want you to think about this, Glenn. Between 1980, we talked about how different immigrant groups come here
Mhm.
at different times and different skills.
Right.
If I go into JFK Hospital, where I've been, where I was born, the names of all the doctors don't sound American.
Right.
It's a lot of Asians, a lot of Indians, a lot of Greek people.
Right.
So thank God they came over here. I want you to think about this. Between 1983 and 2009, the United States resettled about 76,000 Iraqis. Okay? 70% of those people were on food stamps as late as 2009.
Wow.
95% of the Iraqis were on food stamps. 70% of all refugees, but 95% of those Iraqis were on food stamps. The unemployment rate for those Iraqis is about 46%. So we can't pretend that something magical just happens once you come to the United
Right.
States that results in your success. There's certain things that result in that success. And one of the things that enabled my Italian ancestors, we were Riccardellis, by the way,
Okay.
to succeed, is that in the mid-1920s, America basically cut off immigration for a while.
Mm.
They said, we have all these different groups who are coming here and just creating these ethnic enclaves. We
Right.
Italians got off the boat and just stayed in New York. We were like, this was enough traveling for us. We're not going any further. So the way to stop all these ethnic enclaves is to cut off immigration and let people develop a unique American cultural identity. And that's what we did. I mean, you hear all the time, we're a nation of immigrants. No, we're a nation of assimilated immigrants
That's
who
right.
created a new nation. I don't consider myself an immigrant. I'm an American.
Mhm.
I want these people to consider themselves to be Americans too, but there are a lot of hurdles that have to be overcome, and we have to be realistic about our ability to do it.
Right. Well, it's even apparent in the language barrier, to facilitate these folks with, being able to get your driver's license in a foreign language. I mean, that's kind of crazy when you think about it. I think that's a big part of what has happened here in America. We're no longer the melting pot, we're a place where people can come and create ghettos. I mean, in essence, where they stay separated, and that's
Mhm.
unfortunate. And I think that's politically motivated as well, but that's a whole other topic we could talk about. Again, I don't think our politicians have lost sight in general of what's going on in America, and like you said before, I think it's all about lining their pockets in most cases. There's always exceptions, but they really don't even realize this tiger they have by the tail, because as this continues to spiral out of control, it's going to have implications across the board, eventually even leading up to the politicians who consider themselves elitist and separate from everyone else. So if America doesn't wake up soon, I think we're all going to be in a bad spot. And I know people have been doomsayers forever and have been saying those things. The good news is, thank God, from my perspective, God is in control and He has a plan for this. But we also have to realize that God can use us as a part of the plan in a good way or in a bad way. That's His call, and a lot of that has to do with what our perspective will be and where we want to go. What type of values do we want to continue to maintain in this country? And like you said, if we bring these people across the border, what are we bringing them into?
Right.
Are we bringing them into a society that has these Christian Judeo values that have been the backbone of our country and brought us to where we're at our greatest point, which I don't think that is now, but where we were? Or are we just going to flush all that like our current administration would love to see us do and just move forward with whatever comes across the border? Well, and I leave it with you because we have 1 minute left.
Well, I'll just finish with this thought. You mentioned God is in control. I saw a woman with a T-shirt the other day that said, "Who would Jesus deport?" Okay? And my response to that is, Jesus probably wouldn't deport anybody, but He also wouldn't rob from Peter to pay Paul.
That's true.
And that's kind of the dynamic that we've created. But, listen, in every crisis there's an opportunity.
Right.
I think we could really make something great about this immigration opportunity we have.
Mhm.
I have high hopes for these people. I've started to teach myself Spanish. I have my Rosetta Stone on my phone and Pimsleur method I use. I bought my first Santa Biblia this week. It's
Interesting.
Spanish on the left and English on the right, so I'm learning about, in the primero, el Dio Crio, el cielos and la terra, the heavens and the earth.
Okay.
So, look, it's a serious topic, and it's one that deserves more attention than we can give it today. But it's one that we really need to start demanding answers to, because it's going to get worse before it gets better if we don't.
No, I agree. And Jordan, I want to thank you for sharing all these ideas with me and allowing me to share my ideas with you and our audience. And I know that they'll be excited to hear our next show from here forward. Influence America. We're excited to have you listening, and we hope that you'll be in touch.